Hello, and welcome to a special AFTD community information session on the upcoming AFTD-hosted Externally Led Patient-Focused Drug Development meeting. I'm Susan Dickinson, Chief Executive Officer of AFTD. In this information session, you'll learn exactly what an externally led patient-focused drug development meeting is and how it will be run. Two experts in the field of drug regulation, James Valentine and Larry Bauer, have been very helpful to us in planning every step of our March 5th meeting, and we've been very grateful for their guidance. They'll be on hand here today to provide the information you need to be part of this meeting and to answer any questions you may have. The upcoming PFDD meeting will be held entirely online, and it's being designed to be accessible to families across the country and around the globe. This meeting, to be held on March 5th, presents a one-time opportunity for you to share your FTD story with the FDA as a way to help shape the future of FTD treatments. We're grateful that the FDA has awarded AFTD this meeting, and we believe it'll be a pivotal one to ensuring that future treatment options can better meet the needs of families. And we encourage you to take advantage of this unique opportunity. We want to hear your perspective no matter where you are in your journey, because your voice is vital to the process. On March 5th, we'll have the unique chance to educate representatives from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. You'll be able to share what it's like to live with the different forms of FTD and the challenges that arise as the disease progresses. The FDA will want to hear about your experience in managing FTD, whether for yourself or a family member or a friend. And you'll have a chance to share what meaningful treatments for this disease will look like from your perspective. As someone whose life has been affected directly by FTD in some way, your participation is crucial for several reasons. The FDA is the federal agency tasked with approving every treatment that enters the market, and they can better serve your needs if they hear from you directly. Your input can help to shape future FDA decision-making and help to hasten the approval process for potential therapies. Researchers from industry, other nonprofit organizations, and clinical settings are also encouraged to join our March 5th meeting in a listening capacity to hear vital perspectives from the community we all serve. In recent years, the FDA has made stakeholder engagement a priority, and they know how important the lived experience is if they're going to effectively respond to the needs of families facing a disease like FTD. We know that this year FTD treatments are gaining momentum, and the entire drug development process needs the perspective of people with FTD and their families to be effective. Voices of the person diagnosed especially have been historically absent from this process, and we're grateful for the people living with FTD who are making themselves a part of this meeting. Today, James and Larry will explain more about how and why the FDA involves persons diagnosed, care partners, and caregivers in drug development. They'll give you guidance on how you can prepare to share your input as thoughtfully and impactfully as possible. This input will inform the creation of FTD treatments, and it can be helpful to speeding the approval processes as well. As we planned our March 5th event, it's been wonderful to have a very strong showing from biopharma companies and other nonprofits to help make this meeting happen. I'd especially like to thank our platinum sponsor, Ionis Pharmaceuticals, and our gold sponsors, Eli Lilly, Elector, and the Tau Consortium. We're also grateful to our silver and bronze sponsors for this event. Each of you is playing a crucial role in advancing this work. At this point, I want to bring in AFTD Senior Director of Programs, Sharon Denney, who will introduce our guest speakers today to get this community information session started.
Thank you, Susan. I'd like to lay some groundwork before we begin today's presentation. First, the session is scheduled to last approximately 1 hour. All participants will be muted to allow the presenters to speak without interruption. The webinar will be recorded and you'll be able to watch it later on YouTube and Facebook. If you think of a question you'd like to ask, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen at any time. We have reserved some time at the end of the session for questions and answers. And now I'm pleased to introduce our presenters, whose expertise has been instrumental in helping us pull this meeting together. James Valentine is an associate attorney with Hyman, Phelps, and McNamara PC, where he assists clients in patient advocacy organizations and the medical product industry in a wide range of regulatory matters, including new drug and biologic development and approval issues. Prior to joining the firm in 2014, Mr. Valentine worked for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, Office of the Commissioner, where he facilitated patient input in benefit risk decision-making and served as a liaison to stakeholders on a wide range of regulatory policy issues. Larry Bauer provides counsel to drug manufacturers on a wide range of regulatory topics, including rare pediatric disease designation requests, orphan drug designation requests, fast track and breakthrough therapy designation requests, drug development regulatory strategy, preparing regulatory submissions, and drafting regulatory policies and procedures. Mr. Bauer has extensive experience in patient advocacy and has expertise in the planning and execution of patient-focused drug development meetings. James and Larry, thank you for being with us today. And I believe we begin with James.
Thank you, Sharon, for that kind introduction, and Susan for setting the groundwork for our discussion today. It's my pleasure to be with you all as we work to get this community to be prepared for that March 5th externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. Truly a unique and important opportunity for drug development stakeholders, including those companies that are developing products or considering developing products for different forms of FTD, as well as the regulators at the Food and Drug Administration, to hear directly from you to help inform their thinking around what development programs should look like, and ultimately regulatory decisions that will impact products being on the market. Today, we're going to provide some background that's going to help you in your participation in that March 5th meeting. I'm going to start by giving some background on FDA and drug development. That will help lay the groundwork, so that way when Larry starts to provide a description of the role of the patient voice in that process, you'll understand the broader landscape, as well as have a lens into one of our key audiences for this meeting, which is the FDA, and really understanding the role that they play in helping progress drugs through development and making approval decisions. We'll be sure to provide some important information for you in terms of how you'll be able to anticipate participating in the meeting, both in terms of the format of the meeting and just some logistics and other important information you need to know. We will be having the opportunity to answer any questions that you have at the end of our presentations today. So please do submit those into the question box, so that way we can help answer any questions you might have. So going into that background on FDA and drug development that I want to walk you through, we're going to start from the very beginning of this process, which is the drug discovery process. Even before a product is even tested to begin to see if it might have an impact in a particular disease or condition, researchers first need to discover new drugs. And an important aspect of this is looking to see what are aspects of the disease process that a drug might be able to intervene to help stop or reverse the effects of the disease. There's a lot of different kind of non-clinical types of tests. These might be things that you would consider being done in the petri dish, so to speak, to see if those various compounds might have a possible beneficial effect on any large number of diseases or a particular disease. And this could be from learning about existing treatments that exist, sometimes referred to as repurposing of existing therapies, or developing new technologies that might allow for example, more targeted approaches to treatment. Very commonly, types of treatment approaches might be antisense oligonucleotides or gene therapy approaches that are the most targeted at the specific genetic defect. Once this type of drug discovery research has been completed, the result is that certain compounds that are promising are identified and then they can be further developed to start to establish whether they are safe and effective in actually treating the particular condition, such that it could be approved and reach the public. So once we have those product candidates, those early identified compounds or biological products, they then need to go into a regimen of research testing. And before they ever go into a clinical trial, which is the trial in humans, it could be, we'll talk about this, but it could be in healthy volunteers or in individuals with a specific condition, they're first tested in a preclinical setting. And so this is work that allows us to assess whether that new product candidate is reasonably safe for its initial use in humans. These tests are called toxicology studies, and they're done in different animal models to allow us to see what are the harmful effects of a product and what could be a safe dose that could then be used in a first-in-human clinical trial. We also want to get a sense in this early phase, before we go into clinical trials, of getting some evidence of whether the product actually does have some effect that would intervene in the disease. And so whether through chemical assay tests or other types of animal models, we'll kind of do this initial proof of concept benefit or efficacy work. And if we do have good results from these studies, both in terms of establishing reasonable safety and that there is sufficient evidence to believe that the product will intervene in the disease, then a researcher and developer can take that information, submit an application to the FDA to be able to begin clinical research, start those clinical trials in people. So in this first phase of clinical research, you'll see that there's 3 phases that we'll talk about. In this initial phase, if FDA approves, so they agree that there's enough information to allow a product to be used safely and with, that there's enough evidence that it will have an impact on the condition, move into phase 1 clinical trials. These phase 1 trials are small trials. They're short trials. In fact, some of them may only be a single dose of a product before then working into multiple doses of the product. And here we want to primarily emphasize assessing the drug safety, both the acute safety and starting to work towards more chronic safety. And so in traditional drug development, this is usually done in healthy volunteers to establish this initial drug safety profile. This helps us understand what are some of the most common side effects of the drug. And it also gives us a chance to see how the drug is metabolized and excreted. So we could actually, do blood draws, in some conditions, do biopsies, and evaluate to make sure that the drug is getting to the right places in the body that it's supposed to go in order to have an effect, to see how long it stays in the body, how long it takes for it to be broken down and ultimately excreted from the body. So we get a good sense of that. We might have some ways early on to see some markers of whether the drug is having a positive biological effect as well. Once we establish, and often we test multiple different doses of a drug at this stage, so we can then expand into what are called phase 2 clinical trials that allow us to, of course, continue to evaluate the safety profile of the drug. But these phase 2 studies allow us to begin, because they're a little bit larger and they're a little bit longer, to assess some early signs of a drug's effectiveness. So here, this might be the first study where that's in actual people living with a condition to see if it actually shows indications of treatment benefit, both in terms of biological markers or biomarkers, as well as in actual measures of how patients feel and function, or in conditions that maybe are more acutely fatal in terms of survival. And so at this point, we can start to see if the drug really is going to work in the individuals living with a particular condition, we start to use different designs of trials. We might now add a placebo control group that allows us to compare whether what we're seeing in those that are given the investigational or study drug, how that compares to placebo to see what might be placebo effect versus actual drug effect. But these studies are still smaller. In more common diseases that might affect millions and millions of people, we might now be getting into hundreds or thousands of patients. In more rare conditions, like forms of FTD, these studies would be much, much smaller, perhaps just tens of people. Once we've established in phase 2 that proof of concept benefit, we start to see signs that the drug is working. Perhaps we've done additional testing of different doses to see which one might have the most, to see if a higher dose actually does produce signs of a greater drug benefit, as well as whether there maybe are greater side effects with a higher dose. We can then select a dose or maybe doses to go into our phase 3 studies. And these are the clinical trials that are our largest scale trials. They're most commonly randomized placebo-controlled trials, although that's not always the case. And here, this is our most definitive trial in terms of its design that allows us to assess the benefits of a drug. And unlike some of the earlier phase studies, here we're able, because they're longer, we're able to look at more of the duration of the effect of the drug. Because these studies are larger, we have enough people to actually look and see how the drug effect might be different in different populations. So that, whether that's, different sexes, different age groups, different ethnicities, or even different severities of the condition. And again, we can also now more confidently draw conclusions about any differences between differences in doses if people are randomized to different dose groups in these much larger numbers. Of course, we're continuing in phase 3 to evaluate safety, and there's some additional safety type of issues that we're looking for. One is in just being in a larger population, we're maybe able to see more rare but potentially serious side effects of a drug. And there can also be within the study, as well as in standalone studies, ways to look, see whether that investigational or study drug has any interactions with other drugs that are commonly used, particularly anything that might be commonly used in a particular patient population. Typically, FDA would like to see 2 of these phase 3 studies, although they do have the ability in certain circumstances to approve a drug based off of a single phase 3 study, either if it's really robust in its outcome or if it's accompanied by some additional types of evidence that might be something short of another phase 3 study. Once all of that clinical development is complete, we've completed the preclinical testing, we've completed multiple phases of clinical trials. Sometimes in rare diseases, more rare diseases, those clinical phases are combined together. You might have a phase 1/2 study. You might have a phase 2/3 study. So you might be combining some of those different research goals. You might skip going to healthy volunteers, and your first in-human study might be in individuals living with a condition that allows you to benefit from, because every patient is precious. And in rare diseases, we don't have the benefit of having lots and lots of patients that would be able to participate in clinical trials. And so we want to make sure that it's such a important resource to have people who are willing to participate in studies. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're kind of maximizing their participation and also speeding the drug development process, because in conditions like FTD, there are often very great unmet medical needs. There's not a lot of available therapies, that are doing everything that patients need. And so we want to get therapies that do work and are safe to patients more quickly. So once all of this information has been collected, then a drug developer can go and have a meeting with FDA called a pre-NDA meeting. This allows them an opportunity to discuss what would be the basis of establishing the drug's benefit, the drug's risks, how those things would be best evaluated or assessed, and anything that might be missing. And ultimately, if there's agreement or alignment, then the drug developer can put together what's called a new drug application, or in the case of a biological product, a biologics license application, and submit that to the FDA. FDA then reviews that, determines whether there's enough information there to actually file that application, at which time it then conducts its substantive review to determine whether the drug is both safe and effective for use. So this is a long process. Many products, at any of these stages of development may fail to demonstrate benefit, may present a significant safety risk that would be such that the product, should not be further developed. It's a very small percentage of products that ultimately do make it through this development gauntlet that actually then are demonstrated to be safe and effective. And so because of this, it's a very expensive and time-consuming undertaking. And at the end of the day, though, it's in everybody's interest to only have drugs that are safe and effective, rather than have products that aren't tested and may present harm or do no good at all. So I mentioned a little bit about FDA's review. Ultimately, that benefit risk decision that FDA has to make, there is no absolute benefit or risk formula. FDA has expertise in analyzing data. They can look at the trial results and determine what the benefits are, how much uncertainty we have around those benefits, because data is never clean, is never perfect, and only in some cases extremely easy to interpret, particularly in smaller rare disease trials. Similarly, they have expertise in evaluating the safety profile of drugs based off of all of the safety events that had happened. And there's a third prong I haven't talked much about, but FDA also needs to make sure that the drug product is going to be of high quality. Make sure that it's when it's manufactured, it consists of the components that it's supposed to be made up of in the right amounts, and that it doesn't have any impurities or other things that might be harmful to patients when they ultimately take a product. And so these are all things that FDA assesses during its review period. While I only talked really about FDA's role here at the review stage, they do engage with companies throughout these other 4 stages that you see: preclinical, phases 1, 2, and 3 of clinical development. FDA, provides consultation and advice to those that are developing products based off of all of their expertise, and having, honestly, having learned so much from seeing so many other products go through development. And so companies can benefit from that expertise by having meetings with FDA, but there's also a desire and a need to get FDA agreement, because ultimately you don't want to conduct studies that FDA views as being designed in a way that can't establish the safety and efficacy of a drug. I do want to mention that even though most of the time we're focused on getting that drug approved, and that's what everything's leading up to, FDA's role does not end there, and neither does a drug company's role end at the time of approval. When a drug goes onto the market, there's still a lot to learn about a product. Clinical trials, by definition, are narrower, and they don't include the full range of all individuals with a condition that would actually use the drug when it's approved, or in the numbers. There are many more people are going to take a drug than were in the clinical trials. And so because of that, there's likely to be new information, particularly about the safety profile of the drug once a drug goes onto the market. and companies report those events to FDA, and FDA actively monitors those events to continuously evaluate that benefit risk profile of a drug. So I've talked a lot about the drug development process. You've likely heard about, different phases of clinical trials. Maybe you've heard about a trial that's recruiting, and it's a phase 2 trial or a phase 3 trial. And so hopefully this helps you understand a little bit more, although I know that this is very high level, of what that study then, its goals are, and where it fits in to the development process. I want to talk just a little bit about where FDA fits into all of this. As good advocates for ourselves and our community, we're going to be speaking to FDA at this March 5th meeting. And so it's always valuable to know what the role is of the audience that we're speaking to. So in that drug development timeline, there's a couple of things that FDA does not do in that. FDA is not actually the one developing those drugs. That's the researchers, maybe in academia, pharmaceutical companies, and even sometimes nonprofit groups that are conducting research or funding research and doing drug development. FDA is not actually doing that work itself. And along those lines, FDA is not the one that's actually doing any testing of drugs. They're not running clinical trials. However, those researchers that are running clinical trials do need to seek FDA approval before beginning to initiate those studies. Some other areas that FDA is not involved is once a drug is approved, FDA does not have the authority to regulate the practice of medicine. FDA is only regulating the development and marketing of the products. So the entities that they regulate are the companies that develop and ultimately then make those drugs and market them. Doctors, however, are free to prescribe those FDA-approved drugs for other conditions. This is known as off-label use. And finally, FDA does not regulate the price of medicine. During its review of a drug, drug prices are not considered. They're not even provided to FDA. That's not part of their mandate. Even if that information was provided, FDA could not take that into account as part of its decision. But it does not receive that information in its review. So issues of insurance coverage and the price of medicine are things that are not within FDA's purview. However, FDA does play a large role in helping facilitate drug development. It does have a mission to help promote public health, so it is not just a gatekeeper. Its reviewers, as I mentioned, have great expertise in drug development and clinical trials. And so FDA has many mechanisms, primarily through meetings, to help provide technical help to researchers and drug developers. They can help companies design their trials and studies, and they do this through these many meetings throughout drug development. And so everything that they learn through this patient-focused drug development meeting about areas that are most troublesome or burdensome to individuals living with forms of FTD, your treatment goals about what's important from future treatments, that will then help them in providing advice to companies who come before them, as well as helping them make regulatory decisions. If you want to learn more about FDA's regulation of medical products like drugs and biologics, FDA has some great information on the web. You can find it patient-centered information on this URL here. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Larry Bauer, who's now going to talk about where your voices play a role in those different decision points throughout drug development, and then specifically talk about this patient-focused drug development, which is one important way to have your voices heard.
Thank you so much, James. It's good to be here today, and we're looking forward to having this meeting in March. It's been an incredible process planning it. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about more in detail about the actual patient-focused drug development meetings. James has given a great overview of what it takes to develop a drug, and I'm going to go into a little more depth about what's going to happen on the day of the meeting that we have. Next slide, please. So what is the purpose of the patient-focused drug development meeting? Well, what happened was, as FDA was reviewing new drugs, they realized that all of the input that they were getting was coming from doctors who prescribe or the drug or treat people with a certain disease, or maybe from scientists, but they weren't hearing directly from the people who had the disease, who are actually the best experts on that disease. So they tried to develop a more systematic way of getting that kind of perspective from people that are living with a condition. And what does this do? It helps inform their understanding of the context for exploring the benefits and risks of a new drug and for making decisions about whether to approve a new drug. I'll talk in a minute about the benefit risk assessment. And input from people and families affected by a certain disease helps the FDA during drug development as well as during the review of the application for a new drug. Next slide. So this is the benefit risk assessment that every drug that comes to the FDA, it goes under a very thorough review where the FDA staff look at all of the data related to the development of the drug. But in order to make a decision to approve it, they have to look at all the benefits of the drug. So what do those studies show that this drug can possibly do to help people? But as we know, every drug has side effects. So what are the risks of that drug? And they do this very formal benefit risk assessment. And that assessment has these 5 specific steps that they look at. The first one is that they analyze the condition. So they want to understand the disease. What are the symptoms that affect people with that disease, and which of those symptoms affect people the most? And they also want to know, what are the current treatment options available? So are there any other drugs that have already been approved for that disease? Or is this a disease that doesn't have anything available at all? And if that's the case, that might sway them to maybe be a little bit more flexible, like let's let this drug go ahead because there's nothing else available. And then, as I said, the benefit risk section is where they look at the data from the studies. And then they also look at, the last one is risk management. So if there is a side effect or a certain risk, is there a way that we can manage it by maybe, giving a smaller dose of the drug or giving it through a different route? So instead of giving it IV, maybe we can give it by mouth or something like that. Next slide. So the FDA came up with the concept of having a patient-focused drug development meeting. This is a meeting that's devoted, the entire meeting is devoted to listening to patients and their caregivers and learning from them about the disease. It's a framework for discussion questions that came from the FDA's benefit risk framework that I just told you about, and it represents important considerations when they're trying to make a decision. So for planning this meeting, we reviewed this format, and we looked at other disease area questions, and we tailored our agenda for the meeting and questions to communicate the most important information related to FTD. And FDA has emphasized all along that active involvement and participation from people and families affected is the key to the success of these meetings. Next slide. And when the meeting is over, so we'll have this one-day meeting on March 5th, we will summarize the meeting in a report called the Voice of the Patient Report. This will be coordinated by the AFTD. It will summarize the testimony and the input from all of you, people living with FTD, people that are caregivers and partners. It will be, it will capture all the polling data that we do on the day of the meeting, and as well as when people submit written comments about the meeting, this will all be captured in this Voice of the Patient report. And this report will be in the public domain. It will be posted on the AFTD website, so anybody can go back and read the report afterward. It has key communication to the FDA review staff and the regulated industry, so the people developing drugs, about what people with FTD and their care partners or caregivers, what do you most want to see in a new treatment? Instead of making assumptions about that, what is it that you're actually going to say about that? FDA wants this information, and because it helps inform them about ways to develop more meaningful treatments for FTD. Next slide. So now a little bit more about how can you participate in the meeting. We really hope that you all consider participating. Here is a review of the meeting logistics, which will be on the AFTD website. So who is the meeting for? It's for people living with FTD, their care partners, caregivers, and family members, people who are at risk for FTD. So maybe someone had a family member and they know that they personally are at risk, but maybe don't have symptoms yet. It's for the FDA staff. We hope as many FDA people attend as possible, people from the pharmaceutical industry and biotech companies, as well as nonprofit partners. The meeting will take place on March 5th this year. It will start at 10 o'clock, that's a little typo, 10 a.m. in the morning until 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The meeting's going to be 100% virtual, so people can tune in from anywhere in the country and actually anywhere in the world. And it's going to be an interactive live stream that you will connect to on the day of the meeting. Next slide. So this is an overview of the agenda that we're going to follow on March 5th. So the meeting will start with a welcome and introductory comments from AFTD, as well as we'll have a representative from the Food and Drug Administration. They'll give background on FTD and the clinical trials. That will be provided by an FTD expert. We'll invite a physician who has expertise in treating people with FTD to inform everyone about this. And then after that, the rest of the day will be broken into two topics. We'll have two panels. The first one will be focused on how FTD symptoms affect your life. So what are the symptoms that you have, that you or your loved one have? And of those symptoms, how do they affect your life, or how have they changed your life? Then when we get to panel two, that's part of the meeting will be focused on how do you manage those symptoms, and what are the current and future approaches to treatment? So what are the things that you're currently doing to try to help FTD, and what would you like to see in the future? We've divided this panel two into two different groups. Panel 2A will be people that primarily have sporadic FTD, and panel 2B will be people representing the group that have genetic FTD. So they actually have had genetic testing and know the genetic basis for the FTD. The topics during these panels will include pre-recorded panelist statements. For each panel, there's 5 people that will have prepared statements in advance. We will have live polling questions, and then there'll be a moderated discussion with the audience. After these panels are finished, we'll have some closing comments and kind of summarize what we heard during the day. Next. So these are the discussion questions that are going to be for each of the panels, just to give you an idea of the types of things that we'll be asking. So as I mentioned, topic 1 is, what is it like to live with FTD? What are the symptoms and the daily impacts? One of the questions is, of all the symptoms of FTD, which 1 to 3 of those have made the most significant impact on the person with FTD? Which symptoms most affect the individual now? And maybe which symptoms were the most significant at other times in the individual's lives? And then number 2 is, how has FTD affected the person with FTD on their best and on their worst days? Can you describe the best days and the worst days? This will help see the range of symptoms that people experience. Next. And then question 3 is, are there specific personally significant activities that the individual with FTD cannot do at all or not do as fully because of FTD? How does this affect their relationships, friendships with others? How does it affect life activities, things like school, work, their abilities, relationships, self-sufficiency, their living situation and activities? And if you or your loved one could do one activity that you currently are unable to do, what would that activity be? And then number 4 for this panel is, what worries you most about living with FTD? So what worries you maybe for the future? What aspects of the illness really cause you the most concern? Next slide. Then we'll move to topic 2. So this is the panel that has, where we'll talk about the perspectives on current and future treatments for FTD. Some of the discussion questions that we have for this panel are, what are you currently or recently doing to manage FTD symptoms? So which specific FTD symptoms do the treatments address? Like, are you doing, I know some people have issues with speech and communication. Is there anything that you do to try to help the person communicate more easily? Sometimes people write messages down or they use their telephone to communicate. How has this treatment regime changed over time and why? So what kind of treatments have you tried, and then what have you changed? And then we'd also like to know about what are the most significant downsides to these FTD treatments, and how do they affect daily life? For example, are there any bothersome side effects from medications or from the treatments, or do you have to go to the hospital to get a treatment, something like that? Next. The third question will be, how well have these treatments controlled FTD overall? So are they working? Are they working a little bit? What symptoms do they treat, and how well do they treat those symptoms? And then number 4, we're going to talk about on the pathway to a cure. What specific things would you look for in an ideal treatment for FTD? What factors do you consider when making decisions about selecting a course of treatment? So what's most important to you? Is it the prospect of a benefit from the drug? Is it the side effect profile? Sometimes it's how often you have to take a drug. Like, is it cumbersome that you have to take the drug 4 times a day? We'd like to hear from you. What goes into your decision making? Next slide. So the discussion format, I'd like to review this with you. There will be a group of people with FTD and family members for each panel, as I mentioned. I think we'll have 5 people for each panel. The purpose of these panels is to set the foundation for the broader audience discussion that will follow. The panelists were selected to reflect a range of experiences with the condition. And these panelists will have pre-recorded their statement. So we'll see a video of them as they read their statement about their experience. And then people with FTD, as well as their care partners and caregivers in the audience, will have a chance to answer polling questions. The purpose of these polling questions are to be a starting off point for the discussion that will follow. And the people participating in the meeting will use cell phones, tablets, or laptops to respond. And there will be clear instructions about how to log on to something called Poll Everywhere. And then the questions will pop up on your phone, and it's very easy to figure it out and to answer the questions. And we'll see the results of these answers in real time on the day of the meeting. After we do some polling, we're going to have a discussion with people with FTD as well as their caregivers in the audience. Just a reminder, this discussion, we won't be hearing from the FDA. We won't be hearing from drug developers. This meeting is 100% devoted to hearing from people with FTD and their caregivers. And the purpose of the discussion is to build on the experiences shared by the panel. And the moderator, who's James Valentine, who you heard earlier, James is going to ask questions and invite you to submit responses, either by writing them in, sending an email, or preferably, we'd like you to call in to provide live comments. And on the day of the meeting, across the top of the screen, there'll be the phone number where you can call in. So after James asks a question like, what symptoms are most important to you, if you'd like to contribute to the conversation, you can call in. Next. So a couple tips for effective participation. James went over what the FDA's role is and what it isn't. So remember that, and what the purpose of the meeting is. Review the discussion questions in advance if you have time. If you have something important to share, relate it to the most appropriate topic panel question and call in. So please try to when you call in, please try to make your comments relevant to what it is that James is asking about. We want to remind you that it's okay to reiterate a feeling or experience already voiced by someone that's similar to your own, but maybe give it a personal or unique perspective. tell us a story. We like to hear the stories about what people's journeys have been like. Keep your comments concise and focused. This is so that we can hear from as many people as possible. There are lots of voices that we'd like to hear from about this very emotional topic. And just a reminder, you can always send in additional comments at the end of the meeting. Next. So participating in the meeting, as I mentioned earlier, it's by webcast. It's all being done remotely, and the link is on the AFTD to register for the meeting. Anything that you send in or that you talk about will be kept confidential. Sometimes we use people's first names, but we don't use last names. Comments with answers to the questions can be submitted for up to 30 days after the meeting, and you submit those to AFTD, and there'll be directions of how you can do that. And these comments, all the comments, everything that we hear on the day of the meeting will be included in the Voice of the Patient report, which is submitted to the FDA. Next. So in summary, this is really a unique opportunity for you to be part of the process. There is no other meeting like this anywhere where the entire meeting is dedicated to hearing from people with a certain disease or condition. And you can have a meaningful impact on clinical trial design and drug development. What we hear at this meeting is going to help drug companies decide what types of drugs to develop, maybe what treatment or what symptoms they'd like to develop to treat, and then what kind of endpoints they'd like to use in their trial. Your collective voices must be heard at the beginning of the process to help companies design their trials and to help with the FDA risk and benefit assessment that they do. So help shape the future of FTD treatment. Next. So at this point, I'd like to welcome James and Sharon back to join us. And I think we've got about 10 minutes to answer your questions. Please, no question is irrelevant. Anything that comes to mind or questions you have about the meeting, we'd be more than happy to answer.
Well, thanks so much for your presentation. I think you've set us up for a really, really strong meeting and great participation. A couple things, actually, you did mention that people don't have to identify themselves when they participate, and I think that's an important thing to reiterate, that people can certainly participate in the polling completely anonymously, and if they send in comments or questions, their privacy is also protected there. I just wanted to call that out because I think that's important for people to know.
Yep.
Yeah, and if you call in, you don't have to give your full name. You can just share your first name or something like that, just so we can have a little bit of a dialogue over the phone there. But yes, you will never at any point be asked to give your identifying information.
Great, thanks. And I'm also wondering, from all the contact that we have with folks in our community, are we also interested in welcoming to folks whose loved one has died? So if people are family members of somebody who has passed, what's the opportunity for them to participate in the meeting on the 5th?
Absolutely, Sharon. Actually, we will have at least one or two panelists that have lost their loved one to FTD, so they've gone through the whole journey from beginning to end, and we welcome their experiences. We'd like to capture everything from people maybe who were recently diagnosed all the way to people that maybe have already passed from FTD. To really try to understand the whole journey that people go through with this disease. So we welcome everyone to participate.
And I'll even extend that range just slightly further. Individuals who are at risk, we want your participation in the meeting as well. What is it that maybe you're worried about right now, you're thinking about in terms of the future, in terms of the condition in the future, as well as treatments in the future.
And so when you're asking about the symptoms of the disease and people are giving the opportunity to speak to those symptoms, can you clarify, are you asking about physical symptoms as well as other symptoms and other ramifications of the disease? Is there any limit on what you want people to speak to from their experience?
Sharon, it's wide open. We want to know everything and how FTD impacts every area of people's lives. I mean, we've had meetings with other groups where sometimes people are affected by things like depression or anxiety, and sometimes that's the most, it becomes a really difficult part of a disease to deal with. So whatever, whatever comes to mind, if it's physical, if it's psychological, if it has to do with quality of life, activities of daily living, we want to hear every aspect to learn.
I think it's also worth noting that we know how much diversity and heterogeneity there is under this umbrella of FTD. And so really just to underscore that we want this meeting to be able to bring out information about all of those subtypes and all of the different clinical presentations. And so it's something that we've considered in the planning of it. We know that it's a lot to take on in one day, but as you guys have said, the importance of bringing all this information in front of the FDA at this time and in this way is really critical as a foundation for what will be continue to be built on. So especially in terms of those symptoms, people should be really thinking to bring in their experiences and partly to demonstrate just how diverse and heterogeneous this umbrella of FTD disorders is. All of that information is helpful.
If I could just add one thing to that, Sharon, when you're participating in the meeting and you're hearing other experiences, we don't want, we want you, even if you've heard something that is similar or is the same experience that you've had, that doesn't mean just because we've heard it once, that's the only time we want to hear it. It is important for FDA to hear common experiences, but of course, give your personal take on that. How has that maybe impacted you? It might be different than how it's impacted someone else. And then the other thing, more in line, Sharon, with what you were saying, is maybe you experienced something and it's not something many other people with forms of FTD experience. We do want to hear about those rare or less common things. Just because it's not something many others might experience, we do want to paint that really broad picture.
And we might, that was a really good point, Sharon. And during the discussion, we might ask people to actually identify what type of FTD they have when they provide their feedback. So they might want to say, I'm someone living with a behavioral variant FTD. And then just so that when the FDA is listening, they understand which type of FTD we're the person speaking about.
Great. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. We have somebody who's wondering, can you pop in and out of the meeting? If you can't come and stay from the start through the finish, is it possible to participate for selected parts of it?
Yes, the answer is absolutely. If you look at the agenda, we would, emphasize trying to make the parts of the agenda that are the audience discussion. That's when the polling questions will be asked, the audience discussion questions. So it is a good chunk of the meeting, but that's really the meat of it. That's where we're going to get the information and we're going to learn from all of you. So if you have to prioritize one area over the other, I would make a pitch for prioritizing being there for those pieces. But absolutely, if you can't make the morning, jump in whenever you can. If you have to step out for a meeting or to run an errand or have an appointment, whatever, life happens, you can still jump in and out. And as Larry mentioned, even if you miss part of the discussion, we'll be collecting responses for 30 days. So if you miss, the topic 1 discussion on, what are the symptoms that have had the greatest impact and how does that impact your daily life, that's okay. Still participate with us on the treatment questions in topic 2. Come back and write us a comment on topic 1.
Great, thank you. Clarification on if people who are US citizens but live abroad in a country with very little FTD population, can they participate in the meeting? Even if you don't?
Actually, yeah, we used to do these meetings in person, where everybody came together for a big meeting, but because of COVID, we've shifted to this virtual format. And what we have found is that doing the meeting virtually is that we've gotten incredible participation from people all across the United States, but as well from all over the world. We're having people participate from England, from African countries, from, I think we had someone from Kuwait or somewhere like that. And it's great because people are calling in real time from their countries. It's unfortunately sometimes the time doesn't work out so well for those people. People can still tune in from wherever they are in the world, and we would love to, if you can call in, please say that your name and what country you're from, and then contribute to the meeting. It's great. We welcome that.
So somebody wants to know if they can suggest questions for you to ask them on the day of the meeting.
Sure, I can take that one. So we think really long and hard about the range of questions to ask, and they're really designed specifically. I mean, so Larry and I both were formerly with FDA, and we were both at FDA at the time that the PFDD initiative was created. And so the different questions that we have really been tested over time to help really draw out the experiences and preferences of patient communities that directly input into that regulatory decision making that I described and then Larry talked about, where your voices input into that. So and then the AFTD planning team on top of that has thought really long and hard around more specific topics that need to be included. Certainly, if you have an idea of a question, I don't think we would turn that away whatsoever. But during the meeting itself, we're not going to be monitoring for questions from the audience. Think of this as a really big focus group, and so we have our focus group questions pre-designed. So during the meeting, we really want to encourage you to help answer the questions. During the meeting itself, there won't be a chance to ask any questions.
Thank you. A lot of folks. Oh, go ahead, Larry. Do you have?
I just wanted to add something too, that the FDA will not be able to ask questions either. The FDA staff will all be listening through the entire meeting. So, yeah, to really ask questions.
So there's an interest, I think, in understanding a little bit better how people can communicate what they want in treatments to the FDA members who are listening. So especially to the extent that folks may perceive that the FDA is focused more on treating symptoms versus treating and searching for a cure, and the selectivity about what studies advance through that pipeline you described, James, and knowing that only a few studies can make it through, a few drugs make through that really lengthy, expensive process. Can you just speak a little bit to how the discussion will draw information from the community about what they want in treatments, whether it's symptomatic treatments or moving towards that cure ultimately that everybody wants? How does that come out in the meeting?
Sure. Well, one important factor is we want everybody to speak individually. There's many voices, of people living with forms of FTD, both individuals with the condition, their direct care partners and family members, and everybody's going to have different perspectives, and we are respectful of that. And so, we want you to speak to your experiences when we're talking about future treatments. We want you to be honest about what it is that you're looking for. We want you to try to be very specific, though. If you are looking for help with certain symptoms, it's okay to say that, and we want to know that. If you're looking for something that maybe will slow or stop progression of some aspect of the condition, or maybe even overall the condition, we want to know that. And we want to know why that's what you prioritize as a treatment preference. And so then what will happen is FDA will, drug developers, we are all going to hear this range of perspectives. And that's going to tell us that there's a number of ways that we can do something that's meaningful for patients. And so if that symptomatic treatment comes down the pipeline, FDA is going to have heard that something that can help with certain symptoms is important. If we have that disease modifying something on the pipeline towards a cure, maybe something that can help with the whole cascade of disease progression, they'll have heard not just that that's important, that's on top of people's lists, but why, what that would mean to them. And so we're going to be asking everybody, every question is specific and personal to you, and we're going to hear from as many voices as possible. And I promise you, by the end of the day, we will have heard really, we'll have this vibrant painting of what it is that you all need and are looking for. And so we hope you'll trust that process with us, but that's how it will work.
And I think just that option of continuing the conversation after the meeting is really important for people to remember, that comments and questions that come up afterwards can still be submitted and be included in what gets reported back and what gets on the record for FDA through the rest of the entirety of the process. Our community also knows the challenges that exist in diagnosis and how tied those diagnostic questions are to this research pipeline and drug development pipeline. So some folks are wondering, where does the need for biomarkers fit into this meeting and the conversations we'll be having on the 5th?
Yeah, so I'm happy to start off here. So in part, what we're focusing on is the lived experience with the symptoms and health effects of FTD and the forms of FTD, what the impacts are on daily life, and then the approaches to managing that and what the gaps are. So when it comes to things like diagnosis, misdiagnosis or delay in diagnosis are things that are helpful to mention, but are not really the focus of this meeting. What I mean by that is, it's, of course, if you haven't gotten diagnosis, you might not have picked up on symptoms that were at that time, or maybe you weren't getting treatments or were able to enroll in a clinical trial until some later point. So you want to mention that as part of your story, but FDA isn't able to help in saying, well, I had to go to 5 different centers, medical centers, to get that diagnosis, or there weren't good biomarkers for diagnostic purposes. That's just not really the focus of this meeting. Of course, I guarantee we will hear that message of difficulty with diagnosis, but in terms of really where your voices are going to have the greatest impact is to kind of relate that then to your symptom journey or your treatment journey.
Great, thanks. Can you speak a little bit to what does the FDA know about FTD already? Will they have background coming into this meeting that the comments from the community are being fit into? And how will that knowledge base be built?
Yeah, so I can answer that. I worked at the FDA for 10 years. I worked in the rare diseases program. I worked with the division, the neurology division that oversees most of the drugs that are developed for FTD or for Alzheimer's disease. And many of the staff, the review staff, are physicians. Many of them are neurologists, not all of them. So some people have different medical backgrounds. So coming into this meeting, the FDA, most of the people will have a basic scientific understanding of FTD, as well as we'll hear the clinical overview from a physician at the beginning of the meeting, just to remind us all some of the basic aspects of the science of FTD. But once again, because they're neurologists does not mean that they understand the perspectives that will be discussed at this meeting. That's why it's so important that you all participate and call in on the day of the meeting so that we learn as much as possible from you.
Yeah, and I'll go out on a limb and take it a little further. I would even say that the world's experts in FTD don't have the ability to give the level of information you all will provide on FTD on March 5th. You all, they of course understand the science really well. They have great ways of measuring the progression of FTD, and obviously know many of you and have learned a great deal from their interactions with you. But you all are living with or caring for someone with FTD 365 days a year. And there's so much different expertise that you have in having that lived experience. And that's what we're trying to draw out. So rather than design a meeting where we hear from the top 10 world's experts on FTD, there's those types of meetings, they have a role. This is a different type of meeting. And so we really do value your expertise. It's different and is so valuable, and FDA recognized it as valuable. And that's why we're having this program.
And I love that framing, because it's definitely something that, of course, our organization is entirely in agreement with. I mean, we know the expertise that lives among the community. It's what we learn from all the time in the work that we do. And so that is why being able to host and bring this meeting to fruition is so important to us as an organization, because we know how important the opportunity is to the experts that we get to interact with every day. And so I think we're really at our time for today, and I really appreciate both of you, both in helping us to prepare as a staff and to prepare as a community for this opportunity. It's been really wonderful. So thank you again. And obviously we look forward to seeing you guys on the 5th as well.
Yes. Yes, we look forward to being all together on the 5th.
And yeah, getting to meet you all virtually. So.
Right. So I do want to thank James and Larry again for sharing their expertise with us and for being with us today. And I want to thank all of you for being on this meeting and participating with us live today. We are recording this. It'll be posted on our website along with other information about how to participate in the meeting on March 5th. Certainly you've been able to gain a sense of the value and the importance of the opportunity, and we really hope that you'll join us on that day. And as always, we invite your questions to us through info@, if there are questions that were not answered today that are still weighing on you, and feel free to reach out that way or via our phone and the helpline. And then I guess in closing, I would just really want to wish everyone well and encourage you to realize that, especially during the difficult challenges that we have related to the pandemic and the increased impact that has on families, we really want to make sure that you know that we're wishing you well every day and that we look forward to moving these issues forward with you. So thanks very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the 5th.